So this is my summary of Learning from a Stranger, Chapter 5. So in this chapter, the author talks about how we are and can and should learn from other cultures and what they have to offer us. It is one thing to learn about them, but it's another thing to try to learn from them and apply some of what they do to our everyday life. So the author talks about how we can go and take how they apply religion and everyday natural practice to our lives so that we might actually grow. It is said for Western Christians to close themselves to learning from cultural strangers on the assumption that those people do not know God's way, as Western Christians do, increasingly looks not only arrogant but ignorant. And that was on page 81. He continues on to talk about how much you can go to another country without really getting out of your own bubble. You can still go to all of the known places that you usually do, and everything is just in their homeland. So you can go to McDonald's and it'll still be the same McDonald's. It's the same menu, same food, whatever else. It's just in a different country. You aren't totally immersed to everything around you. It continues with an example of technology, and just because many people understand what it means and the benefits of it doesn't exactly take away the barrier between the two different people. So he talked about the two people who were taking German, and it was like one kid who was taking German, but he was in America, and then another person was taking English and they were in Germany. So it was just the language barrier there, because the kid who was taking German wrote everything and explained everything in the way that he would in America, and in like that sentence structure, which is not the way that the Germans were used to it. And so there was a little bit of a disconnect there. Here we go. He finishes with some main points. Just because you speak the same language does not mean that you will understand what the other person says. English works everywhere is a considerable exaggeration, and just because it's done in English doesn't mean that it has to or should be done that way. So I know many times, like if you go to different cultures and you don't learn their language, it's almost in very popular places, it's very probable that you're going to find someone who speaks who will speak English to you, because we are English speakers, and they'll know you right away. They'll be able to tell that you're a tourist. And it's just like, if they take the time to learn that language for us, why can't we take the time to learn just basics enough to talk to them like they do to us? And then he also argues that just because you're not called to do the work of someone who is a diplomat or a teacher or a social worker or something like that, that you are not allowed to teach and learn about other cultures. And at the end of it all, we are called for understanding and patience. So at the end of it all, like we aren't perfect. Our culture isn't perfect. We aren't know-it-all cultures, but we do need to be able to expand our borders and learn about others around us. One thing that I did really like about the chapter is that he calls us out on being in a bubble and only learning about another culture rather than learning from them. So it's kind of like, if you think about other cultures, especially those who learn and are I guess a culture that is heavily Muslim, they have some of the strongest faiths and they have some of the strongest structures in everything that they do every day, and they're so detailed about everything that they do, that it's almost like their discipline is something that you would want to learn from and learn to apply in your everyday life. One thing that I did not care for, and I think it's just because we're getting later in the book and I just see it, but I feel like we're beating a dead horse in that at this point. And it almost seems like we need to be fluent in the culture to really appreciate it all, that it may have to offer us as another culture, and even being fully fluent in it, and what it has to say, so we're able to have basic interactions with other cultures. I feel like he was almost like, you can't just assume that what you have to say is most important because you're a Western culture, which I know isn't true, but it also felt like, oh, because they know enough to know about you, then you should know enough to know about them. And it was like, you should be able to get the basics at least, but then that's also a lot of studying for a once in a lifetime chance of interacting with someone. So these are my takeaways from Learning from Stranger, chapter 5.